Hey everyone, I just wanted to say thank you so much. Back in 2021, I had this crazy idea of doing a regional show, just focusing on the places that we love to fish. And look at us now. It's been 4 years today. 4 years Fishing the DMV has been going. We have over 500 episodes of the show uploaded and over 50,000 hours of watch time, which is like watching every season of The Office on repeat 20 plus times in a row nonstop. It is insane how big this show has gotten. And to say thank you, this is just a little retro episode. I am debuting back to back the first 2 episodes I ever did with Travis Eden and Neil talking about the Shenandoah River in the wintertime. This is episode, I think, 1 and 2 that I did way back in 2021. Please enjoy it. And thank you guys so much for the journey. It's come a long, long way, and it's because of you guys. So thank you so much.
You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your hosts, Thomas Ahrens and Jared Mounts. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens, and this individual right here is Jared Mount. How are we doing tonight?
Doing well, doing well. We're excited to have Travis Edens with us here this evening, and he's with Kingfisher Guide Service, and he's been a loyal patron here to Jake's Bait and Tackle for some time, and I always enjoy when he comes in because I'm going to pick his brain and see how the river's fishing or see his posts and see what they're catching out of the river. And so we're excited to hopefully gain some insight and knowledge from his expertise and experience, spending a lot of time on the river, more than most. And so my first question is, why Kingfisher, guys? Why did you name it Kingfisher? And then just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, so I chose Kingfisher because of many years ago, fishing out on the river with a fly rod, wade fishing in the summertime, and I'm missing fish, just not having a very good time of it. And here's this little bird, the most punk rock of all birds out on the river with that mohawk, flying around, and one of the noises that they make almost sounds like, in my mind, like it's laughing. And so this bird's flying around laughing at me, and so I took that and decided to add it in, for the name.
That's awesome.
So my mascot.
That's cool. They do frequent the Shenandoah River.
Oh man, there's tons of them out there. So.
And then you started as a fly fisherman, actually?
Yeah, well,
that's crazy.
Well, I mean, I of course did conventional tackle.
Yeah.
Early on and stuff. But I guess back in the late '90s, I started fly fishing. Just picked up a fly rod from Kmart and brought it home and assembled it. Got a book. No word of a lie. I got a book called Fly Fishing for Dummies. All right. And, it helped out. And, through trial and error and, going out with some friends that fly fished, you kind of begin to pick it all, figure it out, and
that's in our form. That's something I could not do easily.
Then there's a point, man, where you get to it's like there's a Zen moment where you're like, oh yeah, I see how this all works now. And once you get to that point, you're like, you're hooked.
Yeah.
So
that's freaking cool. Yeah. It's something I've always wanted to pick up with.
And it's not as hard as what I know if you've ever watched, like River Runs Through It seems to be the kind of movie.
Yeah.
Kind of put it on the map, but it looks hard, but that, shadow casting really, in its simplest form, you don't need to do all that. And so it does, I think in a lot of ways, it can help you become a better fisherman. And that's one thing too, like here, we always talk about a power fisherman versus finesse fisherman, but then you got the trout guys, and then you have the fly rod guys. But when you can kind of bring all that together, it can make you, regardless of the type of fishing you're doing, it can make you a better angler.
Yes. Oh, certainly. And it makes you, I think, more observant of what fish are feeding on or what they could feed on, as far as that's concerned, because especially when you're using, feathers and hooks tied together, or feathers and fur tied together to make, the body of the lure, you want to, sometimes you have to change it up a little bit.
Especially when you're fishing a river and you're thinking about drifting. And I'm just thinking about when I've watched like trout guys on TV, that you're thinking about the cast and how it drifts and the approach and how that correlates to using spinning tackle on the river for whatever you're doing.
Totally.
How does that thing look and how it just drifts by that ambush?
Yeah. And I've used like some of those fly tactics of drifting in spin casting.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Especially out on the river where you've got some current. You just, you can almost drift your lure, not even really give it much action through reeling or jigging it or anything, and let the current actually make the bait. Especially like a swim bait.
Yeah.
With that paddle tail, and you just let the current take it, and you get to a point at the end of the drift where it's like, fish aren't going to eat it then, but usually it's that final last little bit of the drift before it starts to look unnatural that it ends up getting eaten.
That's a great point. Now you're native to this area. You grew up fishing the Shenandoah River.
Yep, grew up just north of Winchester, and started out fishing the Opequon Creek. So I enjoy telling my kids, because we live real close to the Opequon Creek, but I enjoy telling my kids that they're the fourth generation to fish the Opequon Creek.
That's
so
awesome.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
What were you targeting in the Opequon, or what were you catching?
Whatever was biting.
Fall fish, I think at the time there's still fall. I think fall fish was in there.
Yeah, you get them sometimes, especially in West Virginia where they stock. You get that fall fish bite, and you're like, oh, it's a trout. No, it's a fall fish.
Though, too. I don't know if they come up from West Virginia or come down from Isaac Walton. I'm not sure, but I grew up on the Opequon as well, and there would be some holdover trout in there as well. And some bass, I think.
There's lots of cold springs that pour into that, creek. Any of the creeks, because we're in a karst area, creeks and rivers, get a lot of, spring fed, where trout could hold through the summer. I've caught trout on the North Fork, and just hanging out in the spring in the middle of the summer.
Yeah. Do you guide for trout, or are trout something that are prevalent on the river systems around here?
I used to. They are not prevalent.
Okay.
But I used to do some wade guiding trips for them. But since I've kind of gotten away from that, I'm more after the smallmouth.
Okay.
So
how much has the river changed? I know we're talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but how much has the river in Shenandoah changed? Because if you think about a river and a lake, I think if a river is more robust, it changes a lot more constantly. And sometimes it stays the same, but how has the fishing changed over the years? Because I remember when I was younger, the lesions on the smallmouth.
Yeah.
And where would you think the river is now compared to the past?
I think we're at like a middle ground right now. So it's not bad. It's not the greatest that it has been. And I do believe that it is cyclical. Okay. So that we're on an upward trend. As far as the amount of fish and the size of fish. I mean, it's I'm not going to knock on wood because I'm a superstitious person, but we're not finding lesions on fish.
Yeah.
And if you do, it's far and few between. So,
as a guy, what was the darkest days or years for the Shenandoah, you think, when you were guiding?
I would really have to say probably like 2018 into 2019 with the high water events that we had.
Okay.
I honestly, as a guide, I'd learned a lot about fishing dirty water and higher than normal water. So, it's that was in my mind, like a down point.
Did that affect the spawning habitat too? With that,
certainly, yeah. And that's kind of been an issue that we've had in the Shenandoah Valley with the Shenandoah and Potomac, is that we end up with floods or high water events right at spawn or post spawn, which will, that year class of fish can be totally gone, non-existent.
And that's a ripple effect, that it's not just that year, but it's years to come before you really feel that, where you lose that class of fish.
Exactly.
Which, yeah.
So take us from growing up fishing the Opequon, fly fishing, to what led you into guiding? Or prior to, up to guiding? So
guiding, with the fly fishing passion, I eventually got into where I wanted a fishing raft, right? One decked out with a frame and stuff that you row. And I come from a whitewater background, canoeing, stuff like that, kayaking. Was a river guide, for one of the outfitters up there at Harper's Ferry. And so eventually, I was like, I need a boat. and a boat that is not, a hard-bodied boat, something that I can get through some stuff that, is a little bit chunkier, rocky, stuff that you probably wouldn't take a harder boat through. And settled on a fishing raft, purchased it, got it in it was like January, brought it inside the house and inflated it.
Like a kid on Christmas.
Right, exactly. My young son, he was ecstatic. I mean, he was probably like 4 years old, something like that when I got it. And so it was like a big bouncy inflatable inside the house for him. But so the boat came first. All right. And I had it.
How old were you at this time? Approximately.
I would have been 30, 34, 35, something like that. Gotcha. So in the back of my head, I had this idea that I wanted to become a guide at some point. Thought it would be pretty cool thing to do. And so then had the boat, was already taking friends and family out. Eventually ended up when the recession hit. I lost probably close to a third of my pay because I was in retail. And so, bonuses, if the sales aren't there, you're not getting the bonuses. So lost close to a third of my pay and decided that I needed to recoup that somehow. And at the time I was living up in Harpers Ferry, and I thought,
opportunity.
What do we have at Harpers Ferry? Well, there's no industry really other than tourism. And so decided to go the tourism route and start guiding.
That's awesome.
So, and here I am.
Here you go.
And so then when you're guiding, what kind of rules and regulations do you have to because I always think like a charter, as in you're in the Florida Keys on this big boat. Are you under those same guidelines when you have to get into guiding, or is it different with a raft that we have to go through?
It's a little different. If I did have a, the charter license, like a 6-pack license, folks would not have to have a fishing license when they were on the boat with me. But I haven't gone that route. The logistics behind that, the time and the money that comes into getting that particular license would be just, I don't. You don't
have to deal with it.
Which
is awesome.
Yeah, I don't have to deal with it. So, with guiding and stuff like that, of course you have to have liability insurance. And in some states you have to have a guide license, like West Virginia, Maryland, Virginia, you do not have to have one. But liability insurance, like I said, and you have to be comfortable with strangers. I mean, people every day that, some of them I may never see again. Some of them I'll see multiple times afterwards. But, it's you got to be a customer service oriented, tying hooks on.
Because you can't get away from them in an 8-hour day. You're there.
No. I mean, honestly, sometimes, the boat ramp just doesn't get there fast enough. So,
so then, when you're planning out, and let's say this time of year from October to February, let's say, are you primarily just the Shenandoah, or because the Upper Potomac's right there, and then you have where they both converge? I mean, do you guide on all three of those different ones, or are you specifically focus on one? I used to guide on all three, but I've kind of strayed away from that, and that was in part due to the high water events. Okay.
Excuse me, that we had back in 2018. Well, and over multiple years, like the Upper Potomac doesn't fish quite as well as what it used to. We don't get the numbers in. Big fish are still there, but we don't quite get the numbers in that we used to. Same way with you could probably call it the Upper Shenandoah, or lower end of Shenandoah, down where the whitewater stretches and stuff like that, has seen the same issue as far as numbers.
And I think what he means, if there's from like Harpers Ferry all the way up until, which would be like 7 would be that kind of area you're talking about?
No, particularly below the Millville Dam.
Oh, Millville Dam, okay.
Yeah, so Millville Dam down that Shenandoah section.
Okay.
Which comes into the confluence there at Harpers Ferry. Again, just doesn't fish quite as well as it used to. So I've moved a lot of the operation more to the Virginia sections, main stem of the Shenandoah. with doing some North Fork trips as well and South Fork.
Okay.
But primarily main stem.
What's your favorite section of all that you've done?
Or does it change depending on the years?
It does change depending on the time, time of the year. I like, mostly, like right around the Route 50, above and down. If you go too far upstream, you get to like, Egypt Bend and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's deeper water and it has its moments, but
are you doing 50 to locks, or are you going to do 50 to 70?
50 to locks.
50 to locks.
Yeah. You don't want to do 50 to route
that's
7.
a long stretch.
That's a heck of a stretch. And that's the one thing. How do you gauge that? Because I remember the one time, God love her, she still stayed with me, my fiance at the time. I was like, you know what? We're going to float from the 7 Bridge all the way down to just before Harper's Ferry. Because if you look at a map from very far away, it's like, that's 4 hours. That's no problem.
Yeah.
Cut to, it was 11 o'clock at night and she's crying because we're still out there.
Right.
How the hell do you gauge a trip to where it's like, because you have to, because it's an AR trip. Like, is it because you've done it so many times, or can you look at a map and be like, yep, this is how fast we're going to float it?
Honestly, what I do a lot is check a map. I've got it's called like Map My Run app.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it's topographical, Google Maps, and you just kind of scan in, find what section you're looking to float, and you just drop pins and you can measure it.
Okay,
The
interesting.
distance, And some of it's been trial and error. Back in the day, I mean, me and my buddies decided we were going to float from 50 to Route 7, and,
Yeah.
by lunchtime, all the beer was gone. And no, and we didn't want to, have
more
the
food.
corner of our man card ripped off, because then stop and ask somebody for help. So,
Oh my God. Yeah.
So generally that 50 to locks and then locks to Route 7 is generally, those are 2 floats on the main stem that in this area that are pretty good.
yes, very good, very good.
How do you, and I think we touched on this earlier, but I being a Loudoun County boy at heart and seeing the growth there, and let's say you're going to do a summertime trip, does that affect it with Watermelon Park, and that you'll have 6 billion guys with coolers floating? Do you adjust your float trips in the summertime knowing about the float traffic, I guess you'd call it, like on the river? Or does it affect the fish at all?
I mean, it'll affect the fish to a certain extent, but like up around Harper's Ferry, I mean, those guys, the outfitters up around there, their busiest weekend, they'll put 2,000 people on the river in a day.
Wow.
All
right. So, I mean, I've caught, when I would fish that section
a pedestrian.
lot, I mean, you would catch, we call it a tuber hatch, and it looked like, Fruit Loops floating down the river because they have different colored tubes. But
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
Well, and there's 3 outfitters.
I didn't know that. Okay.
So, I mean, you figure 3 outfitters, I mean, that's a lot. That's potentially 6,000 folks, in a very small area,
And the South Fork tends to see more too with Downriver Canoe Company, Front Royal Canoe Company. So
Yeah.
you're right. In the summertime, you kind of have to look at that. And
Yeah.
How
But
do
as
do
far
that?
as the fishing, generally, I don't think it really affects the fish that much. I mean, you just don't fish close to them. I mean, you get those guys that end up, you're obviously fishing, everybody's fishing off the boat in a certain direction, and you get that 1, 2, 3 tubers that come floating down through your area, but most people are very observant.
Okay.
I mean, if you've ever been yelled at by an angler on the river, you'll think twice.
Yeah, because I was just thinking about that, because I remember one time I was on a buddy's jet boat and we come barreling around the corner and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I just thought from if you're making your living doing this, it's like, is that because like the TVA system or a tidal chart, you can look and say like, okay, this is when things are going to happen. But in the summertime, you can't really set your watch to, if you have this person that you have to put on fish and you turn the corner and there's 6 billion tubes, like that's something that it's almost out of your control.
And don't get me wrong, like if I see like a big mass of folks coming down the river, I'm going to do one of 2 things. I'm going to stay ahead of them.
Okay.
Or I'll let them pass by and let them get way by, and then, kind of pick back up, Sometimes it's a good time to stop, break for lunch.
Okay.
So,
but then, so the fish, it doesn't take long, because that's the one thing I would be shocked about, is like, it doesn't bother them to have all that commotion, because I would think like that would shut down an area for a while.
Maybe they just get used to it after a while.
Now,
So-
do you adjust from your summer? Is one float basically good depending on the time of year, or is it basically I can just basically do one float with my son, and this float I can, there's a good shot I can get on fish, or does it really change depending on the time of year?
It does change some depending on the time of the year as to smallmouth movement.
Okay.
So, for example, like right now, we're kind of in that transition from fall to winter, and so you're still going to find some fish in transition. So they're heading to deeper holes for the winter time, and that's where they're going to settle up. You're going to find fish in that deeper hole, but you can't discredit that some of that shallower water, and some of it's dependent on water levels as well. But yeah, so I mean, you can still find fish. So I will, if I'm going to do a winter float, I might float a whole totally different stretch.
Okay.
And usually, depending on the water levels, I probably won't even bother beating any of the water until I get to that deeper spot.
You always felt the fall, although a great time of year to fish, you're talking about transition, it can be hard to find them too, because once they get to that wintering hole, then you kind of pinpoint that. But, coming out of the shallows, going to the deep and where they're at in that, what have you found? Is it water temperature, or what seems to be the determining factor when you're in that transition? Is there anything you've been able to drill down and say that?
Definitely water temperature. Water temperature, and they can sense that the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer. So they start making their way. You were wanted to touch on a point that you kind of mentioned on, or was going to make a point to what you were talking about, and that was. I had a trip on Wednesday and Thursday, and my Wednesday guys, all right, were fishing in a summer mind frame.
Okay.
So they're fishing, below, in riffles and stuff like that. It's like, they're probably not in there.
Not gonna find them there.
Yeah. So
Now, if you have a kayak or a float tube, and you don't have $10 billion of electronics, are you basically deciding that this is the deep pool with your eyes, or do you have electronics on your tube?
No electronics.
What are you looking for then visually if you want to say, like, this is a place I should try to cast?
Just usually eddies.
Okay.
Or for example, you might have a pour over, a small ledge or something like that. The downstream, if it's deep enough and you can't see the bottom, you get that kind of gray-green colored water.
Okay.
That's a good chance that there's going to be some fish there.
Okay.
So,
And that is
really
definitely, I know Neil was talking too, that learning to read the water.
Yeah.
You do that as a trout fisherman or a creek or whatever, but just
Yeah.
reading that water, sometimes watching bubbles or watching a stick come down or watching how it hits that rock in an eddy case, how it comes back and works upriver, and you got the slack water in there on the river. I mean, that is being able to read the water and what that current is doing and where those fish are staging, I think. Is if you don't know that, then that's something you need to research and learn and watch and kind of.
and that's where fly fishing
comes in.
can come into play, because a part, and especially like if you're like fly fishing for trout, you're like you're on the small stream, little creek, something like that. You're hitting the seams, which is the line between the eddy and the fast moving water and stuff. I mean, and then you just translate that into a bigger, river and
that's where time on the water, guys, comes really into play for this. Because, like, again, not to bash on Bassmasters again, but like you read about stuff and like you follow your electronics, and that stuff can be a quickly learned skill. But when you're reading a river, or if you're having a jet boat and you're learning how to run it, or whatever, it's something that just you can't learn that quickly. It's time. It's to get out there with a guide that knows the water, learn it. So first you can be safe. I mean, that's the thing, is if you're on a river, especially when it's a little bit colder out, you don't want to have a situation where you're flipping over or something like that if you don't know what sections are dangerous and what sections aren't.
I'm just smiling because I used to teach outdoor education in high school, and we would take them. I mean, we'd go through Downriver Canoe Company and rent the canoes, but I would go over the basics, the paddling techniques for the front and the back, and and just basic techniques to help them out, and which side, if you want to turn or whatever, and then reading the water, the downward V's, and what to do when you're going through the rapids and stuff. And it was always interesting because you try to show them, you try to teach it, but until you get on the water, you get on the water with, I don't know, it might be 30 boats, 30 canoes, and they're doing 360 down through there, going sideways and everything else, and so anyway, but you're right. You got to be able to apply those principles too.
Yeah.
So.
It's So then fly fishing, I'm really loving this. Like, what are the best times to fly fish the river? Because I'm thinking like a deep pool and fly fishing. My brain doesn't wrap around that is the best time. But...
Yeah, definitely. I would say, your better months, late April through, early October, are good to, get out with the fly rod. And the big thing is that if you're wade fishing, that can be, you've got to be careful out on the water. I mean, you could bash your shins.
One slip.
There's all kinds of, possibilities of bad things that could happen. But from a boat aspect, you can extend that, your success rate even better, to be able to get out there. But, generally those nicer months are really good. You could get them in the wintertime. You just would really need to know where to get them at and what to throw at them and to have the right equipment to do it, so you're not going to have, through the nicer months, you're going to have a floating line that literally sits on top of the water.
Okay.
Whereas in the wintertime, you're going down low and deep to fish for them. So you have to have a sinking line and a heavy fly. Something weighted.
You recently had with the whole cicada. I remember seeing your picture come across. Now a lot of that was probably fly rod, correct?
That was a lot of fly rod.
He was. You go on his Instagram page and you'll see some huge
monster. I call it carpocalypse myself.
So talk about that a little bit. That doesn't happen.
No, that's a once in 17-year event right there.
But you took advantage of it.
I took complete advantage of it. So, and I had guys out that had never picked up a fly rod before. So tie a cicada pattern on there, shuck a bunch of line out, get them to just a basic, lob cast almost, maybe get them to do a little bit of false casting. And, we came up with some very, very successful days. But yes, it was a lot of fly fishing and carp, amazing. I mean, you don't realize how many carp you have in your waterway until you have a brood 10 cicada hatch, because they're all over up against the banks and sipping cicadas off the surface. That's just like crazy. Trout sipping flies off the surface.
And you say that, what you said, the sipping, I remember this has been many moons ago when I was canoeing the river, and I was going we put it in Warner's Bottom. We had permission on a private landowner. And I like that stretch because, and I think they call it Hawkins Ledge. I don't know if it's ever been officially named, but right above Hawkins Ledge used to be one of my, and when you're coming up from locks, there was only one chute right there. And if the water wasn't right, you didn't have the right boat, you weren't going to get above that. So it wasn't heavily fished. But at any rate, I can remember two different trips, where the first one down on spinning tackle when I threw the Rapella floating minnow. It was on the top. It was in the summertime, and twitch, and that bass smallmouth just crushed it. I mean, it's probably 3 pounder, 3.5 pounder. Yeah. But great fight, And I came back maybe 1 or 2 trips later in the summer, and I brought the fly rod. We'd always tie these. We called them deer hair bugs. That's what we had, the deer hair, but it was similar to an elk hair caddis, basically. And like you're saying, you just flip it out there. Well, it was the same seam you were talking about before. I caught the other one. I thought, it's been there before, so floated down there, and it was I believe it was the same fish, no way of knowing, about the same size. But where the first one, it just hammered it. This one, it did. It literally, that bass literally just sipped. And I guess
right off the surface.
Because it's the fly, they know too. They don't make not saying they won't attack, but it's a totally different bite. Same fish, 2 different, presentations, 2 different experiences. I mean, it was kind of cool.
So creeping on your Facebook profile right now, like these carp are freaking massive, and I've seen some specials where people are specifically, I think what they call it, like LA sewer trout, like they're actually fly fishing for them. What are your thoughts, I guess, on them? Is it something you can only target on the river when the cicada hatch happens? And if not, like, are they actually a good sports fish to actually catch?
They're actually a great sport fish. They're kind of a white whale for some fly guys.
Really?
And they were for me for a while. And then, back, I guess, early 2000s, I picked up a book called carp or fishing for carp on the fly or something like that. It was kind of, it was a real, some kind of voodoo or something like that, something very unknown to me that I wanted to learn because if you've done any fishing around here, I mean, we've got common carp in all the waters around here. And they were, from what I understand, brought in as a food fish since they're not native to here because they can live literally anywhere in any kind of water. Lakes, ponds, creeks, rivers, you name it.
And they get big too, right?
Yeah. And they do get big. And so you can target them other than during the cicada hatch. And you've just got to get, sometimes it's the moon and the stars have to be aligned just in the right way, for you to get, a shot at them. But you catch one, I mean, it's just, you hang on is what it is with fly rod. I mean, it's, any fish that takes you to the backing on a fly rod.
Oof, that's fun.
Is, oh my goodness. is a admirable fish.
So is it a treat when you catch one, or are there like seasonal patterns that you can reliably, like if a person says, hey, I want to go out and catch a carp on a fly rod, is that something that you can do? Or is that more of like, everything's got to be just right?
Yeah, no. I mean, we can definitely target them, sometimes these carp are, will show up in areas kind of like clockwork.
Really?
Yeah, you can almost set your watch to it. And that was the learning experience that I had with my first carp on the fly, and really specifically trying to target them. I mean, I'd go out and smallmouth bass fish, and this is the same area where, the kingfisher was flying around laughing at me. But I'm out there and, these carp, every time I was out there, same time, every day, here come these carp, a pack of them feeding. And so, you just kind of watch and, I'm trying to get ready to, I'm fishing something for smallies, maybe a popper or something like that, top water. And I see these carp coming up and I'm like, whoa, where's that fly, that I'm going to tie on that I specifically wanted to target the carp with, and I'm trying to tie it on, and I'm dropping flies all over the place, and, my knot's not even the best knot, and I'm, finally I just get it on there and I go to make my cast and the carp are spooked and gone.
They're spooky, right?
Yeah,
like compared to a smallmouth, it's more spooky.
Yeah.
So if you see one, like talk to everyone about like the approach, because I think this is something like I've heard about people fly fishing for carp before, but I've never gotten a chance to talk. Like this is something people don't do.
Well, it's kind of like, it's almost like deer hunting.
Okay.
Deer hunting, you go sit in a tree stand and you let that buck, come into you or come within range, for you to be able to get it. And it's kind of the same way with carp. You can go up and set and just wait. And, if it's an area that you've been observing for a while and that they're going to move through there at some point in time, good time to, just set and wait.
Okay.
But yeah, it's, it's a challenge, but it is, when you do hook up, the payoff is, super exciting.
Oh, I wish I was there for the locust hatch. That would have been amazing.
Yeah. It was amazing. And it was amazing to watch those carp because eventually, within the first week, they ate every cicada that fell into the water. Within a week or two, they were selective.
Interesting.
And they were smart enough that they could see, so a male cicada, their body's a bit hollow because they're the ones that make the noise, the mating call, whatever you want to call it. And so they ride higher in the water film than what a female does, which has the eggs and the ovipositor and all that stuff. And so they ride lower in the water film. And you would see a carp come up to obviously a male cicada that's riding higher, turn around it and catch the male or the female that was behind it.
That's wild.
That is really crazy. And that's a time that is freaking awesome.
Yeah. But that's observation, and that's where fly fishing, like I said, you observe, you match the hatch, you kick rocks over and see what's, on the bottom, or, if you're catching smallies, sometimes when you hook a smallie, and what's it do? It pukes up what it's got in its stomach, and you can get a good idea sometimes as to, what they've been feeding on.
So let's talk about smallies a little bit, because I'd imagine that, I know that's the predominant in this area, smallmouth bass.
Oh, yeah.
And rightly so, because I mean, pound for pound, those things are fighters. I mean, you jump out of the water. I mean, you just cannot beat a healthy smallmouth on the river with the current. And so you've had a lot of experience with that. You don't have to divulge all your deep secrets, but I would imagine too, you're being a guide, your bread and butter is having people have success and putting people in the right place and throwing the right things. And so a thing or two about catching smallmouth. What would you be willing to share with our listeners about your success, or what you think is takes to be successful on the river?
Yeah, honestly, success comes from it's boils down to time. You spend a lot of time. I mean, you can go out there and fish and catch a big fish, without even really doing any research, which that's luck, is what that is. But it is. Time spent out on the water. I mean, I spend a ton of time out there. Even when I'm not guiding, I got to get out there and fish sometime for myself, right? I mean, you can't just, you can't catch them from the couch. But yeah, so, as far as like that is concerned, time, and then switching up, your baits, and kind of knowing what season, what time of the year, you get a little bit of time and grade out on the water, and you can start to figure out. And, again, it's like I was talking about the transitioning smallmouth this time of the year, and, being in deep holes and stuff like that, you start to pick up on, where the fish are and what they're going to eat.
You said switch. I struggle with that. How do you determine when to switch baits, let's say, or locations? Like, is there a rule of thumb you use to say, you know what, this isn't working, I need to switch it up?
Yeah. Well, let me give you an example. This past summer, there was a point in time in August, and man, when it was, hot as blazes out, my normal baits that I would throw that time of year, like a paddle tail swim bait, something like that, was not getting the job done. And it dawned on me. I was like, let's go back to basics. And so I went back to throwing just a simple, like 3-inch grub on an 1/8 ounce.
Last time you heard about grub being
Mr.
fished.
Twister.
Oh my goodness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man.
And it made all the difference. I mean, it really made all the difference. And like, the fish were willing to eat that, but they wouldn't eat the normal swim bait that I would throw for them that time of year. And so, it just kind of dawned on me one day when we were out there, and I told my customers, I said, all right, we're going old school, guys. And we went old school, and it paid off. So.
Wow, that is pretty cool.
Yeah, and that was like in the hot doldrums of summer, when the water was low and the sun was just beating down on you, and sunburned city. So,
and you mentioned before in passing the cicadas turning over rocks and looking. When you're talking about the river ecosystem, there are seasonal forages that the smallmouth and the predators really look for. If you could divulge in that a little bit, like I remember the hellgrammite. As a big thing. But then you think about maybe the hellgrammite is not a seasonal thing. So from spring, summer to fall, what are the key forages that really change the fish, barring some like Brood X thing? Like what makes them change? Yeah.
So, so bait fish, they'll die off in the winter. All right. And so there's fewer of them through the winter seasons. So generally, that's probably not the best imitation to throw, some kind of bait fish imitation, like for example, in the winter. The one other thing, like a hellgrammite, which, you can fish those all year round. Crayfish, I mean, tons and tons of crayfish in the river. And if you've ever caught, like I said, when that smallie, you catch that smallie and it, pukes up its lunch, you're probably going to see some crayfish bits floating around in the mix.
Are crayfish a seasonal thing as well, or is it always good? Is there better times of the year?
They're a year round. Okay. They're in there year round. So
they say they would burrow at a certain temperature, but I don't think I don't think it's cold enough here. And the other thing I always thought is the fish is not gonna, even if they did, let's say they kind of burrowed and weren't as accessible to the fish. I'm pretty sure one scurries by a smallmouth, it's not going to be like, you're not supposed to do that.
No.
Saying that. I think I have heard on some bodies of water if it gets too cold. But like you're saying, it doesn't apply because the fish, you can always throw that.
I've seen monster crayfish, like that long, like 5-6 inches long in the wintertime.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
On the bottom, on the bottom, a lot of times in the shallows, I'm assuming they're probably warming up a little bit, in that shallower water, a little bit more active,
Right.
Yeah. Are there different types of bait or like, so example is like we talked about earlier, like the shad are a big thing, or elfwife. What type of bait fish do they, I've never even thought about that. Like, are there bait fish they actually do target when they're not targeting crayfish? That would be Shenandoah considered bait fish?
Shiners,
Shiners on the Shenandoah?
yeah, I think
Really?
we've got shiners
Okay.
or something along those lines. Mad Toms,
Sometimes they're huge.
Huge
delicacy.
yeah.
Because I'm thinking like when I'm fishing a swim bait on the Shenandoah, it's like, what the heck am I trying to imitate here? Because it's not a shad.
Well,
like, what are they
sometimes-
trying to eat?
they're cannibals too.
Well, I was gonna say, they're dog eat dog.
So
world.
Okay.
they'll eat other smallies.
So post smallmouth spawn, they're thinking that they're hunting down the brood of the year
they
type
could
of thing.
very well,
Okay.
yes, yeah. But yeah, it's I'm just trying to think. So the Mad Toms, all right.
I gotta Google
Are you?
That's huge.
Yeah, are you not familiar with Mad Toms?
No, I'm
Oh
not.
man, dude, it's like a little baby or a little miniature catfish.
Really?
Yeah, and they have spurs on them on their pectoral fins that actually have a bit of a toxin in them.
Oh wow.
Yeah, if you handle them too much, you can your hand might become numb or something like
Seriously?
that. Yeah, they're really interesting little.
It's amazing that
critters.
they sell some, but there's not too many manufacturers
No.
out there making a Mad Tom, and which
Right.
is for the river is like you said, the Hellgrammite. A lot of people know the Hellgrammite,
Yeah.
but the Mad Tom, it's
Yeah.
those smallmouth. love
A good friend of mine was with the Shenandoah River Keepers, and he did some studies with some of the scientists, biologists, and so some of these smallmouth that they had harvested to dissect and kind of figure out what makes them tick and measure tissue samples and stuff like that, see if they've got any toxins in them. They found that these fish had prick marks down their gullets all the way to their stomachs and in their stomachs,
Is that right?
and it was from Mad Toms.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, even though like it probably stings them up, numbs them up,
Yeah.
whatever, but boy, they see those Mad Toms,
And they talk about like you hear like the smallmouth too. Their noses you see on top bridge of their thing where, and it could be a crayfish too. Crayfish, it could be anything.
Yeah,
Trying to get away under that rock. But
Yes.
when they're onto them, man, they'll get down.
Yeah.
Really.
scar their nose up,
So that's really interesting. So like the smallmouth on the river system around here are not looking at pelagic species. Like we were talking about the alewife in like the Lake Holiday and Lake Frederick, where they're looking up and they're chasing and ambushing. Where if you think of the smallmouth on this river system, they're down there looking down most of the time,
Mhm.
Right,
and they're feeding around there, which
Yeah.
is wow. I didn't even know this thing existed. That's crazy.
I would think your bigger ones tend. I always felt the bigger ones are tending to stay to the bottom.
Mhm.
I mean, you might get them come up, hit a top water or something certain times a year, but
Yeah.
predominantly, I think I always felt the bottom is where you're gonna.
Yeah.
No, I had another question. Sorry, like this is like to actually have you here. When I was a kid, I would kayak. I remember I was kayaking the river, and there were all these little bugs on the river, and you could just see the bluegill stuff would like start sucking them in. And I threw a little trout magnet, and all of a sudden I hooked like a 3-pound smallmouth after these things. But I was like, what are these bugs, and why would a smallmouth feed on something like that small, or are they like what's going on there ecosystem wise?
As far as like hatches and stuff on the river, is that what you're referring to? Is like a hatch of something, something small. There's tons of different, bugs that hatch on the river. Back in the day, like the white fly was super huge. As far as we'd have some monster, hatches of these bugs, but it's hard to tell exactly what that might be. A lot of folks, see those like water skippers and stuff on the river, but like the fish just don't smash those things up. And for what reason? I'm not really sure why they don't eat those. But what maybe they, and you said it was like a 3-pound, like smallmouth or decent sized smallmouth.
It was a decent one. It was just so weird. Like the bugs, there was like a ton. It was late summer and there were like a ton of bugs on the water.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like the top water bite started happening. And
Yeah.
it's so crazy. It's like, are these hatches something that you key in on when you see them happening? And do the smallmouth change their feeding behavior based on hatches?
I mean, and some of it could make them change their feeding habit because of the fact that maybe there's something else that's feeding on smaller, feeding on that insect. That's hatching on the river or landing on the water, and maybe they were after that. That's
I guess
that's
you also
crazy.
have
Yeah,
the entomology, I guess, and if you think about the hatch in the streamer nymph stage, so like, and we think of them on the surface, but by the time even the Helgermite, I mean, when it's under that rock and then fall, it used to be. I remember we were going to Shepherd, we would go up to Dam 4 and wait, and we would just literally, you take the rocks and take the Helgermites off and
hook them, and yeah.
But anyway, so from that to it gets its wings and flies, but anywhere in that, as it makes its way to the surface, I got to think too. I mean, fish are I don't want to say they're going to eat pounds of that, but it's there, they'll eat it too.
I mean, like it's so smallmouth too. Though I mean, it's not a trout. So like you could have a 22-inch trout, and if you examined its gut, you would find thousands of these small bugs, that they've been sipping off the surface,
That's crazy.
And in part, that's because trout have a much smaller mouth than what a smallmouth bass does. Whereas a smallmouth, I think typically tend to, they like some bigger, bigger meals, and that's why, like, if you go out, you just don't see a lot of smallmouth hammering those hatches that are coming off the water. You'll find a lot of the smaller guys, and they make the little ripples and stuff on the water, but the bigger ones, generally they like something a little bit meatier,
and that's
a little bit more substantial.
Big for the people at home, because they tell you, fish a big ass wake bait or a walking bait for the smallmouth. But if you're gonna go fish Shenandoah, like, a lot of that conventional wisdom, just leave it home, and stick with the bottom bouncing baits type of deal, generally speaking. I can't have you on without asking this question. The muskie.
Yeah.
We're probably gonna get into the love and the hate relationship, but first off, do you ever guide for them, or is it just smallmouth?
Primarily smallmouth.
Okay.
I see muskie. We have muskie bites, but when you're fishing with smallmouth tackle, generally when that muskie bites, you come back with nothing on the end of your line.
Well, and that leads to the second question, which is the increase in the muskie population. Has that changed? How has that changed the river? And specifically, does it change the pattern of behavior with the smallmouth?
I think that there is some truth that it would change the pattern of smallmouth, because I've fished some areas that I was like, man, they've got to be here. And I mean, I could just imagine that wood pile sitting up against that bank, and what's in that wood pile, it's probably some big, long muskie, and we've got some big ones in the Shenandoah. Just this past winter, they'd shocked up two, I think, that were like 52 inches down on the South Fork.
Lord.
Yeah, monsters. And so I don't guide for muskie, but they're in there, and I'm sure that they, the big question is, that's some people have a love-hate relationship with the muskie, because they think, it's, they're eating the smallmouth, and very well. I mean, they would, whatever's, prime, I mean.
Same has been said of the catfish too.
Yes.
You're seeing just huge
and
masses of catfish. I mean, just
and that's part of the problem. Catfish on the Upper Potomac is that somebody has released flathead catfish, and I know
they're mature smallmouth.
Yes, and flatheads prefer live bait versus a chunk of meat thrown out there.
And we're going to just be a hot topic here. So I fished up at Lake Champlain, where I've seen pike smoke a smallmouth I've caught. I have no doubt that muskie will hit a smallmouth. And that's why, like, you've been doing the river for so long, just to think about, for better or worse, because I think muskie are fun to fish with and all that, but it's still, if you're a guide, this does change. If you introduce wolves and you're a deer hunter, it changes how they act. Like, if you've seen that kind of change, because that's a big ass super predator to have in the Shenandoah or the Upper Potomac. Especially, it doesn't take a lot of them to change things. And so how do you effectively then refish if you have to change it up? That's interesting.
fortunately have not really fallen into that, where I'm seeing so many muskie. I mean, I see them every now and again. Sometimes we get follows, when you're smallmouth bass fishing, you look down and, there's one right there at the edge of the boat, as the customer's pulling their, swim bait up and out of the water. And it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
Look at that guy. So, but yeah, as far as, I have really not noticed it changing up anything. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing then.
Yeah.
Wintertime then. I guess this would be the last question I got on top of my head right now. But with the wintertime, you hit a hole. How long are you staying in that hole before you're moving on to the next one? Because when you're thinking of like a drift, I'm thinking in the summertime, I might go a little bit faster to find that good water, dead water. But in the wintertime now, you kind of know that they need to be in these holes. How long do you keep a customer in an area before we're like, we got to bug out and get to the next one?
I mean, I've been known to fish some holes till the sun comes down. So, because I know they're in there. And, in the wintertime, I mean, it's like windows, sometimes it's no bite 30. Other times, I mean, it's on like Donkey Kong. I mean, as far as the fish bite's concerned. I mean, I've had winters. Sometimes I'll fish a hole, spend a couple hours in it. And it depends on how big it is and how deep it is and what kind of structure's down there.
Yeah.
Earlier we were talking, you gotta have gotta have those rocks, for the smallmouth. You start feeling that chunky bottom, you're in the right area. And it might take, 2 or 3 runs across that chunky bottom to come up with something. It might take, 15 runs across that chunky bottom.
So do you think that's contributed to, I've always felt there's feeding windows. Do you think there's feeding, like they're there, they're just not eating, and then for whatever reason?
Yeah, definitely feeding windows.
Lunchtime or
whatever, dinner time. And you can't peg those down, they're all over the place.
I think that's the best way to explain it, because we do know that. I mean, that you'll hit a rash of, you'll put 3 or 4 in a boat, and
then all of a sudden it goes cold.
And nothing, and then
I highlighted another question. The moon. You hear about that. What are your thoughts on it? Like,
I don't have a whole lot of faith in it.
Okay.
I mean, there is some truth to it, but I've had customers before, and I've tried it. Like the solar calendars, and the app, and I'm like, oh, okay,
it's a full moon now.
It's a 5-fish day today, and go out and get just about skunked. And then I've had other times where it's like, oh, it's like a 2-fish day, so. Well, we're going to go out anyways and just have a phenomenal day. So, but so fish, smallmouths specifically, they will feed through out the, like night, if it's a full moon night, water's clear, they'll eat at night. And you'll find something in some certain times of the year, especially in the summertime, late summer, some of those big smallmouth will go up into those shallows and wait and feed.
Is there, what do you look for to make the switch? Let's say, okay, it's time that they're making that switch to night feeding. Is there something you're looking for specifically?
Just
like
that full moon. Full moon, because it stays lit.
Okay.
As long as there's no clouds and stuff like that, they'll feed through the night.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
I never thought about night fishing on the river before.
Yeah.
Like, you think about that for the lakes.
Yeah, never. It'd be harder, but I mean,
it is.
I was saying earlier, look, we always think of catfishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah, but whereas with the smallmouth, you're not marinating your bait. You want something that makes noise. You want something that makes vibration in the water. Something like that, because smallmouth senses, I mean, at night they might not necessarily be able to like really focus in on it, but they can hear it, and then eventually get up close enough to feel it and see it, and that's when they'll make their move.
What is your busiest time of year for guiding?
Generally late April to mid-October. Okay. This year's extended a little bit with the warm fall that we've had. We kind of went straight from summer into winter here recently, but with the warmer temps, those fish tended to linger a little bit in that transition area before heading to the deeper water.
Flow rate. Last thing, I promise. For people that don't know that, like, unless you fish like the TVA system where you have that current and talking about the flow rate. And I heard Ott Defoe talk about this once, about he would constantly look when he won on Douglas about the flow rate. How do you learn? Is that just something where you show up and you can just sense it because you've been doing it for a while? Do you use an app? And then from there, once you learn, like, this is what a flow rate is, what do you look for, and how does that affect the positioning of smallmouth?
Yeah, so like with the flow rate, the best place to find that is the NOAA website.
Okay.
And you can get gauges, all over the place, and when I use like Fish Main Stem, actually, I'll use 3 different gauges.
Really?
Yeah, because you've got the North Fork and the South Fork, and then I use the Millville gauge, which is like way far downstream, and is driven a bit by the dam flow. But I'll use all 3 of those and just kind of get a good round number, to figure out, what height or what flow rate we're at. So the faster the moving water, if it comes up fast, generally the fish are going to go and hold close to banks, hold in some of those dedicated areas, like eddies and things like that.
So they're the faster the current, the tighter they're going to be. They have a smaller strike window if it's a faster current. Okay.
Yeah. And you generally, when you got a faster current, what ends up happening is you have more dirt in the river because it's due to rainfall. So the rain, hits and washes sediment into the stream, and then the water gets dirty. And so that, will play a definite factor, clarity, on success, when you go out fishing. Flow rate, will definitely, is another that, will play on the success of it. So
from a safety standpoint, and I could be completely wrong with this. If I'm looking at the map and I'm going to go out at Watermelon Park, and the flow rate 20 miles ahead of me is asinine, it's crazy, but mine's okay. If I'm looking at this on a Friday, is it safe for me to go out the next day, or is the idea like, depending on what the flow rate is up here, it's going to affect my area? And what would be dangerous?
Yeah, if it's upstream, it's definitely going to, and you're fishing downstream of it, it's definitely going to affect you. And, you just got to, like I would say, if out on the Shenandoah, 2 feet, 3 feet, is fine. But if you get up to like 6 or 7, which is not flood stage, depending on what boat you're in, could definitely dictate.
I think it's probably, and I don't know what location I would use, but I would say generally it's probably about a 2 to 3 day from down south to the time you hit. I mean, as far as a rain event down there, you're seeing high levels down there. Figure 1 to 3 days, I think, and then you're going to start to see it.
And that's,
and I've rode the bubble, because it comes up. If you look at the gauge, it'll come up, and I've been in front of the bubble. I've been on the bubble, and I've been behind the bubble. And if I had a choice, I'd rather be in front of the bubble.
So would that be like before the front hits, so to speak, for the fish?
Yeah, before that water level gets up. I mean, it'll literally because you get a graft on the with the gauges, and you'll see it, kind of an uptick on it, and like, all right, it's coming up. And so that generally will kind of impart a bit of a fishing frenzy.
How and I'm sorry, so when I used to fish, I used to float the river a lot, and my mom would get paranoid when it was raining heavy that I was going to get caught in flash flood and die, because that's how she thinks of a river. What is safe for you and your dad to go out with the rain and everything? What is do flash floods happen on the Shenandoah? What does that mean? Or if it's raining a little bit, it's not going to just all of a sudden a wall of water is going to come down.
Yeah, really, it's dependent on what's going on upstream. As far as we generally don't have, like a tidal wave of water, coming downstream. Usually it's a bit of a, like a gradual, but I've been out on the river before and seen the river come up a foot while I'm out there.
Okay.
So, if you're wade fishing, that would definitely make a difference. But it's,
yeah, and you definitely, we're not like the Susquehanna as far as flow rate.
Yeah.
But you can, even the Shenandoah though, especially in some of those spots where the rapids, the problem is, or like low water bridges on the south, and then the rocks, that's the problem with Shenandoah. The rocks, the trees, the debris.
Yeah.
And that river's flowing.
Yeah.
You're flowing, you're moving with it, you're going on a pretty good clip, and it doesn't take any time at all, depending on the raft. That's the advantage of the raft too.
Yeah.
But if you're in a canoe or kayak, you need to be very, very careful.
Yes.
Or even jet boats. These jet boats,
Yeah.
I mean, these guys that are running them, they've got some experience on the water. They
Mm-hmm.
almost know, they can almost run in their sleep because they know where every rock is. And I would, to your point too, for safety, if you're not familiar with it, you're not experienced. And that website he said too, you could even do a general search of Shenandoah River Millville gauge.
Yeah.
And it'll bring up
the NOAA website.
And learn to know those numbers, and then when you're on the water, correspond that to know what you've got, because it can get tricky and get quick. And, and that's, you got to be, safety on the river. Unlike a lake, you can be safe anytime, but the river, it can be a challenge.
Yeah.
And especially if you're not experienced.
Yeah.
In those conditions.
Yeah.
What are flow rates? Just generic numbers for people listening at home, where it's like, this is too dangerous, or if it's at this flow rate up here, I'm just not even going to go try to wade or launch my kayak down here because this is just no good.
Sure.
Generic numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. So generic numbers, usually I go not necessarily by, flow rate, cubic feet per second. I go by the level.
The level, okay.
Yeah, and feet. And so, safe stuff, right around 2 feet, 2.5 feet to 3, is generally pretty safe, in my opinion. Could be good for a good time floating down the river. Like I said, if you get into like 6 or 7, I don't know off the top of my head what that flow rate is, but man, she's cooking.
Yeah.
She is cooking. So
that's good to know, though.
And then the biggest thing around here that people really don't understand is the water temperature and air temperature.
Yes.
So, like, I know a lot of my experience in summertime, and I can tell you, tons of stories of, again, just getting sideways a little bit, hitting that rock, and next thing you're in, just, we've had some canoes like in half, like
fold.
Fortunate to be alive on some of them, where you life jacket,
right?
But fortunately, in the summertime, you can swim,
right.
And so, but at any rate, there's definitely considerations as we encourage people to get out on the river.
Yes,
definitely, even as a wader too.
Yeah.
I mean, growing up wading, I can remember too some, and I grew up trout fishing and wading the river and could swim, so never really had any concerns. But some of the undercurrents, the holes. And the ledges in that river, it can be, and people drown every year.
Yeah,
and I think the country sense, and the reason I bring this up is because I have a lot of kids asking me where to fish, where can I wade? I want to get a kayak, and it's like, but they don't have the country sense because they're not from here. They're all transplants, and so they get to the river and have the information like, okay, I need to have hard and fast rules to know, like, this is probably where it is dangerous, and I need to think about that, because when you're young, you don't think about that.
Respect Mother Nature.
Yeah.
That's the key. And he'll tell you that
most certainly
that water.
Yes.
The force of the water. And that's what, if you come up and hit a stationary rock and that water you're moving, and the force on the upside is tremendous amount of force. And so, or dams too. That's another big thing, is you get too close to dams, and
that's where they're like whitewater kayakers get into trouble, as they get pinned, and that force of that water just pushes them down, and you can only go so long without air.
What are some of your best or worst experiences guiding on the river? Clients.
I tell you honestly, this past summer, I had some older gentlemen in the boat, and we were doing a multiple boat trip. So we had, I think it was 4 boats out, and the one guy, he was a little bit of a hardhead, wouldn't listen to everything that I had, instruction and stuff, and so I got short with him a couple times, but then at the end of the day, it really kind of humbled me, was the fact that he came to me, and his parting words were, I just wanted to let you know how much it means to us old guys for you to get us out.
That's cool.
So, I mean, I was like, man, hair, stood up on the back of my neck, and yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, probably like the worst time was guy ran that whopper plopper hook into his finger and it came out through his fingernail.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, it's the old whopper plopper.
Yes.
The big seller.
Yes, it does. It does.
You
And
doing
it's
the big one or the small
it was the 90 and
Yeah.
it went in right there and came out right there in the middle of his fingernail. So that was a clip it and pull it out, bandage it up, and I got to give it to the guy. He kept fishing. So
That's cool.
afterwards.
You know, listen to your traps too. I mean, it is cool if you want, and you do get out and fish on your own, but it's not a. You're definitely not a selfish fisherman from the standpoint. You're taking people out to enjoy, the river and the fish and and the passion for that and sharing in that and getting people out in that environment. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, man. It's I get them all ages. I mean, from 8 years old to 99-year-old guy. So. And then, I get a lot of folks that, haven't been fishing since they were little kids. And so, they don't have that Mickey Mouse, Zebco, rod that, they were fishing with. Now they've got this open faced, spinning rod and, you got to teach them how to, cast it and how to retrieve it and stuff like that. And so, it's for lack of a better term, like an ambassador to the sport.
Absolutely.
I mean,
so how does one that would be interested in a guide service with you? How would they find you, and how would they book a trip with you?
Yeah, so I'm on. I have a website, Kingfisher Guide Services, at kfguideservices.com and wegofish.com, which is a little bit easier to remember. Facebook and Instagram as well, both, under Kingfisher Guide Services. And, get my phone number, shoot me an email, shoot me a text, give me a call. Yeah, I'll get you on the books.
And kind of what would someone expect then for these trips? If once they booked with you and they're going to go fishing, kind of what is the expectation? What do they need to bring with them? And what can they expect?
So as far as like what they could bring, I have a whole list of things, wear shoes that you don't mind, getting muddy or wet, what kind of clothing to wear, things like that. Bring some sunscreen, hats, sunglasses, so on and so forth. And generally what they could expect, on the trip is that we meet at the takeout ramp, load up. I have a shuttle driver who meets us there. We drive upstream, get the boat loaded up, drop the boat in. Everybody loads up into the boat and downstream we go. And then while we're out there, because I do offer drinks, snacks, lunch as well. And then
lunch there.
Yeah.
Talking peanut butter and jelly or like...
no, man. It's usually like, some subs, maybe some cold fried chicken, some fruit.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, but on some of the stretches, what I'll end up doing, especially in the summertime, is because I bring tables and chairs, and we'll actually set up tables and chairs and have a lunch.
This is 5-star.
Yeah, but
so much about the experience.
Yeah, and well, so some anglers, they don't want the table and chairs. They want you to hand them a sandwich. They'll take a couple bites off it and they'll keep fishing. Other folks, they want to, hop out of the boat, maybe do a little exploring, maybe, do some fishing while I'm setting lunch up. I'll literally set in the heat of the summer, table and chairs up right in the river.
Oh, that's nice.
And, we'll dine with our feet dangling in the river, so.
Well, we are in a great area too. I've always felt that. It's the Shenandoah Valley. As a whole.
She's beautiful.
River, you get on that river, especially, we've used to do a lot of floats on the North Fork down where Tom's Brook, and there's just a lot of private land down there. You could float for 8 hours and not see a soul. And it's and see deer and turkey and bear. It's just all eagles. So anyway, no, it's more than just fishing.
Yes.
It comes down to catching fish is almost a bonus.
Yeah.
In a lot of
like I said, it's not about the rod being bent; it's about time well spent.
There you go.
Amen to that, sir.
You can quote me on that.
Yes, I will.
Love it.
Well, thank you, sir, so much for having us. This has been great, and hopefully we're going to have you back on. And again, link to everything, all of his information will be in the episode description as well as on the YouTube video, so we can reach out to this man, book him. He is awesome.
Highly recommend him.
Absolutely.
Great
Thank you.
person.
Thank you again, sir.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on.
Being an ambassador to the
Yeah.
Yeah.
You really are.
Thank you.
No, we're good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your hosts, Thomas Ahrens and Jared Mounts. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Thomas.
So we got a special guest today, which is actually really nice to have in studio. We don't have to try to fiddle with that other technology, but we'll get there eventually. So what are we going to be talking about today?
So yeah, we got fortunate to have Neil Quince with us today, and Neil, we were talking, before we started here. You hear people talk about how far back we go with the opening of Jake's in the old location in the little box that we were in, probably going on 10 years now. And so Neil remembers that place, and it's been interesting to see him evolve as an angler over the years, and where he was and where he is now. And so Neil, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Neil Quince, as Jared said. And yeah, fishing, specifically bass fishing, is my passion. I think going back to growing up, neither my father or grandfather fished. I had nobody growing up. It wasn't interesting to me in the least. I was a hunter. That was my style. I enjoyed every fall when it came around, but and even growing up living at Lake Holiday, never really fished it once. Fast forward a little bit, post high school, I get into the military. I joined the Marines. I was in the Marine Corps for 6 years. And then post military, I did come back to the area, and I was living in Manassas at the time, and things were good. I started coaching wrestling. I had a high school team that I was a part of, and got that, unit cohesion that I was missing in the military. But when I transferred to Shenandoah University to start taking classes and, really came back home, I needed something to do. And, you can only hunt in the fall. And I was looking for other things and an excuse to get outside. I had some close friends of mine that loved bass fishing, and that's how it all started. And I was able to find a little place in town called Jake's Bait and Tackle. And yeah, that's kind of where it all got started.
I think that's interesting, Thomas, how, I was fortunate. My father, kind of took me fishing. And so, but not everybody, and I think your story is somewhat similar in that respect, that, we take for granted that not everybody, grows up in that environment, if you will. So, when or where you actually come into the sport of fishing and the passion for that is different for everybody.
Yeah, and it really is. The knowledge is generational, usually speaking. It's somebody close to you that gives you the opportunity and opens this door for you to actually enjoy the great outdoors. And we were talking a little bit off camera that, like, this is a very transient area. I heard some people joke it's like California 2.0, because everyone comes here, and because of that, I think you lose some of that culture, that outdoor culture specifically, and it makes it even harder to get involved with the outdoors versus if you lived in Tennessee or Florida, where it's like you got 3 generations, and if you ask somebody about fishing or whatever, they're like, oh yeah, you go here, here, and here. You ask a rando around Leesburg, they're gonna look at you cross-eyed, like, is this a thing you can do? So how, getting in this area, how did you start finding, was it through Jake's Bait and Tackle that you found out where to go fishing, and you started to talk to us a little bit about that?
So it all started for me after I figured it out. It actually was at the hospital pond at the Winchester Medical Center, which, again, I'm not even sure if you're authorized to fish in there at some points, but I was told that there was one pond, at a certain time that a buddy and I could go fish, and that's where it started. And it was just, learning. I couldn't even tie my own knot at the time. I had to go fishing with him because I was like, hey, I'll buy the stuff, but here's a hook. Here, can you put it on for me? And I'm fishing and knowing what I know now, he didn't really know exactly what was going on, but he knew enough. So I'm out there with straight braid on a bait caster fishing a Senko, and that's how it became. And it was nice in that farm pond kind of environment because you just kind of had to cast out there. You could, practice your hook sets on, little 10-inch bass, and it was fun because you're catching it. So when, oh man, this one had it choked, I didn't set the hook quick enough, and things like that. So that's always a great environment, I feel like, to start at that pond level. But kind of having nowhere else, and friends start to get married and things like that, it became, well, I'm the only guy left doing it. All my friends that kind of got me started, have stopped fishing as much as I wanted to. And it became diving into social media, YouTube videos, and kind of like self-learning. I was like, look, what are the techniques that I have to do to catch the most fish? I got 3 hours. I'm not trying to go out and get skunked. I mean, that was always my goal. Like, I just need one. Like, let me, like, just an hour after work before dark, I just want to go get one. I spent a lot of times on Google Earth, Google Maps, you know what I mean? Like, trying to to ask for permission for places to go. But then it just became easier. What are the closest public spots I've got?
Yeah.
And again, we did talk off camera. The Shenandoah River, it would be the closest geographically to me. Bank fishing a river, that can be a little tough.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, it's nice if you know where the hole is and you can go right to it. But there's a lot of private property and things like that. Where am I going to park my vehicle? Can I just park it and then walk for miles up the river and wade fish like that? But I'm not going to do that when the water temperature starts getting below 60. So that kind of limits you. And then you go out a place like a Lake Frederick, which is another, it's a great place to do, but you're limited to the banks in there. And then I always heard about this Lake Holiday place, and shoot, I even used to live there, but unless you're a resident, you don't get to enjoy those fruits of that. So you would always hear like, yeah, we tore them up today. I'm like, man, I got skunked at Frederick. Where were you guys? Like, oh, we were up at Lake Holiday. So that became another piece, is like, well, like, so I'm really limited to Lake Frederick and the Shenandoah River for a realistic time to fish. For me, in my location in Winchester, I've got to look at, if I do want to make that trip to Anna, I mean, I'm nearly planning a weekend for that. I mean, you might as well dedicate a day. That's not something I can go hit after work, and things like that. So
I think that kind of makes you unique too, though. When you think about when you break fishing down, and this area, we've got the river rats, and if you have some guys are fishing out of their jet boats, and they're flying up the river, going up the South Fork. Can go into that shallow water in a bass boat, versus the kayak or canoeist. I know I started off bank fishing, but also canoeing with one of my buddies, and we would, do float trips, we called them. We put in one location and take out at another and fish the river. And so, and some people have the glass boats. They're exclusive lakes. They're going to Lake Anna, Smith Mountain Lake, your big lakes, big bodies of water. But what makes you unique, I think, is that you're kind of a hybrid in that you will. You fish out of a boat, and you'll fish Riverton, the Shenandoah River, as well as Lake Frederick, Lake Holiday, and the other lakes. And so maybe just talk to our listeners, about each one of those different places, and because they definitely fish differently. A river's going to fish differently than the lake. So, but you seem to have success in both areas. So what kind of approach do you take in those different local bodies of water?
And not to cut you off. So, and the boat, for everyone to listen. So boat wise, what are you running right now?
Right now I have a Bass Tracker 185. It's an aluminum boat with a 60 horsepower Mercury. Okay. And I run a prop.
Okay. And that's just good. Since we are in the river, we talked about kayak stuff. He is running a prop. And so the places that he'll be talking about are places that if you have a prop, this is some place that you might be able to have access to.
That's a good point.
Absolutely. And I think just real quick before I get into that, we talked about it. There is that progression that we talked about. You got to have, we don't have a huge Texas lake that we grew up on. I mean, unfortunately around here, if you're blessed to live on Smith Mountain or Lake Anna, but it's just not realistic, at least for me and my budget, to own a big glass boat. I don't live close enough to anywhere to utilize it enough. And I mean, and look at some of our friends that have the really nice boats. They don't get near as much use out of it as they would love to. So I just didn't see it fitting for me. Also, if the water's low at certain areas and ramps become, questionable with the drought, I'm not afraid to put my aluminum in. So that's one thing for me about running that. But
It's funny you mentioned that because my cousin, I was sending him the pictures of smallmouth you recently caught, and we'll try to post those as well.
We'll overlay them.
And he laughed because he said, and that's the progression he had. He was running a decked out John boat, and he spent a lot of time, same thing, Lake Frederick and Riverton. And he said, I miss those days, on the river, because now he has a glass boat and he doesn't take it down there. So
Yeah,
that is a very true statement.
Yeah. And then for the viewers at home that aren't in the area, so out of Front Royal, Virginia, you can look on a map. You have really three places that we're talking about right now. It's Lake Frederick, it's Riverton. Riverton is actually the area if you cross over. What road is that?
522 going into Front Royal.
522 going into Front Royal, and there's a dam. And so right there, it backs up the Shenandoah River where the two forks connect, and that creates a place that you could put a bigger boat. Many tournaments go out of there, and then you also have Lake Holiday, which we'll get into here in a minute as well, which is a privately owned lake, but it's comparable to the same size as Lake Frederick. And so those are the three areas. If you're not from this place, if you wanted to do some research, at least you know where.
Yeah. So yeah, and with my progression, it didn't take me long to discover that I needed to get out there. I got, not really fed up with the bank, but I was ready for more. Every time I would show up and I'd see the guys launch their boats, I would kind of like think to myself, like, man, like that's gonna be me one day, So you're kind of always looking for that next step. I didn't go the kayak route. I kind of thought I'm just going to save up and invest and get a realistic bass boat for myself, which is where, the Bass Tracker aluminum became a great fit for me. It's something that I can take to a bigger lake. I've had my boat out on Lake Erie, Lake St. Clair, and the Detroit River.
Sir.
Yes. I'll take that thing anywhere. But I can also put it out on the river. So I've learned to travel around, but I guess we'll start with the Shenandoah River and the part of Riverton that you had addressed, the confluence where the North and South Fork meet. The ramp most of the time is pretty clear. Even if the water's low, you can get a boat out of there. You got to take it easy till you get down to the confluence, and then it opens up, I would say, a 5 to 5.5 mile stretch of water where you can run. There's nothing stopping you from going full blast. There's no speed regulations or anything, and it's good water. There's a couple bridges that you have to be careful for, but other than that, it's fairly open.
And for those who don't know, that first bridge you come to, he was talking about the confluence. It'll be a train bridge, and if you make a right, you would go up the South Fork, but everything he's going to be talking about is down from that bridge to the left, downriver.
Yeah. So I have personally, I've gone up as far as I was comfortable with my prop on both sides, but I'm looking for any depth that's at least over 3.5 feet before I even put the trolling motor down. And that, again, a big adjustment for me. How do I fish the river? What do I do besides of word of mouth? I don't know anybody from this area. I've got no experience, and my first time going out there, I have to try to find this information. So you start Googling, and YouTubing, and a lot of things come up with professional anglers, and they're talking about these big, huge lakes and how to fish and talking about shad. And I'm like, what is a shad? And then I come to find out that we really don't even have shad around these areas where I'm fishing. So I'm like, I'm buying all these like white little shad stuff and finding some success, but I'm like, yeah, I'm not seeing any of this stuff on my graph that everybody's talking about.
And that's the hardest part too, because it is the overall media narrative, and this is not a negative thing, is what sells, and it's what bodies of water tournaments are held on, because that honestly, for the fishing market, generally speaking, is where everything is tilted towards. So you're talking Gunnersville, TVA systems, where do you have big tournaments, and that's where we're going to get content for, where we have the knowledge base. But you're right, if you're talking about how do I fish a pond, how do I fish a river that is average 4 feet deep and maybe one pool that's 10, no one really talks about that, and it's uncharted waters, no pun intended, and it's hard to find information on that, and you have just to go out there and just learn on your own, unless you know one dude that does it. It's not easy information to get.
And that goes to why you wanted to start this, Thomas.
Yeah.
I mean, just because you felt like there was nothing in this area, exactly what you're saying, that caters to this area.
Yeah, because I remember when I was starting to fish Leaders Lake way back when it wasn't completely, built up with houses that, yeah, I would go through the Bassmasters like, okay, you need to throw a 9-inch Bastrix swim bait. Let's try this thing. It's like, God damn, this is bigger than everything that's in here, but I'm not getting bit, but this is what they told me. And then after years, I like, okay, only some of this you can just plug and place and it's going to work for you. You've got to adapt to where you're fishing. And exactly, it's to be able to get that information out to everyone that lives in this area, or if you're going to come by here and you want to fish, because we have fantastic, I think Virginia is one of the best rivers. You could have a fantastic either jet boat or kayak smallmouth trail, and you could hit the New River, the James, the Shenandoah, the Potomac, the Rappahannock, and then the Susquehanna. Like, that's insane, and most of them are right in this state. But no one talks about that enough. They really don't. But not to cut you off to get back to it. Like how for this river, for the people listening at home, how do you approach it? And we could go the full year. Or do you just want to just start with right now, in the fall time?
Either way, you can just
whatever you want to go.
Yeah. So I guess biggest takeaways for me is once I found that section where I knew I could go, and depending on the weather conditions, is kind of where I always start. Whenever you're looking at any river, specifically the Shenandoah, that does flow from south to north. Not only do you have to look at the rain and weather patterns in this area, but how much rain did we get down south? Because I had an incredible day recently out fishing, and I go out the following day and the conditions had completely changed. But I'm like, we didn't get a drop of rain. And I was like, well, shoot, like down south, now it looks like chocolate milk is what is fishing. And I guess some of the biggest things that, I was learning when I first started was looking for eddies and things like that. Cause I don't know what that is, like slack water. And I'm just looking at a river that is flowing. I'm like, we don't have like, it's fairly a small river system, because the huge rivers that you do first Google are the Gunnersville and the TVA lakes that you're thinking about, Tennessee River. And the Shenandoah is not quite that, but it's also so different from the Potomac. I'm not fishing grass mats, there's no topwater frogs coming out on the Shenandoah part that I'm fishing, unless there would be conditions where I'm looking for flooded areas that had possibly come in. But on a normal day, I'm looking at weather conditions are going to be your biggest thing, leading into water clarity. I have found success in both. I do prefer when the river is clear. I just feel more comfortable. The flow isn't quite as fast. So immediately, if the river is what we would call blown out, or if it's up and the water is moving quickly, you got to look at, well, when I cast my bait out, am I going to be able to work it realistically, or before it's like blown past me on the boat where I'm fishing? Do I want to throw up current or down current? When the river is up and is flowing pretty good, I really don't want to bring anything up current. I want to try to go to a heavier weight, whether that be a tube or a crankbait to a spinner bait. Anything that I'm throwing a moving bait, because it's just not realistic with that water flowing heavy to try to work something slow on the bottom. You're gonna catch a snag, and that's the other thing. It can be frustrating depending on the conditions. Boat control and boat positioning is going to be important. But if you're working either, we'll just go with Route 66 bridge that you're familiar with. If you know the Shenandoah, it's a popular area and it's known to hold some quality fish. Well, when the river's flowing really, anything above 4 feet above normal, you can't throw anything, I guess, downriver and pull it up. I just find myself getting snagged, and you're just going to go through lures and weights and baits. So I'm looking for something heavier, weight-wise. I would normally try to switch over to a bait casting gear versus a spinning rod. And then, cranking and anything that's a moving style, whether it be a swim bait to chatter baits, work as well. But, it's hard to not fish a moving bait when you're dealing with heavy current. Okay.
And that's something I think is very important, because if you're a kid that watches Bassmasters and you watch them on the St. Lawrence River, which is predominantly where they go, you have in your mind when you fish rivers for smallmouth, you're using 6-pound test and you're drop shotting 24/7. That is that river. And that's because of the ecological conditions that make it towards an aquarium, and you can see 500 feet. The Shenandoah, I don't think it ever gets that clear. And so I think a lot of people here are like, wait, you're going to use a bait caster and stuff for smallmouth? Because very few people do that. Well, that's the St. Lawrence is completely different. There's a lot of rivers, specifically like the Shenandoah, where, yeah, you're using maybe a power Ned rig on 14 to 15 pound test, and you're using crankbaits and chatterbaits, just like you would largemouth. So don't just think because like the pros go to like one river, that's like all the different rivers. So, but
yeah,
continue.
and when you do look for those, highlight YouTube videos or Google searches of what's the best smallmouth baits to catch smallmouth, your drop shot is coming up, Ned rigs, small little baits. Generally, everything is going to be on a spinning rod with 6 pound test, and that's kind of like what you do. Well, that's to fish the Great Lakes and the big river systems like the St. Lawrence up in New York. But again, relative to my conditions and where I'm fishing on the Shenandoah, those just are not viable options. The river channel, it gets too tight, and the flow is just not realistic. And I know some people, and I'm not talking about going out in unsafe conditions, but when the river is up and the clarity is really bad, and it's like as soon as you drop your lure into the water, you can't see it. That was a condition that kind of scared me. I was like, well, today's going to be tough. I didn't understand, you can still catch them in those conditions. But my favorite ways to catch them, are still going to be like your drop shots and Ned rigs and little swim baits. I just put those rods away. I have to focus moving baits and, focus areas where you can just fish. If you can find your boat in a situation where, you're relatively able to keep it in the same spot, you're in an eddy. When the river's up, if you can get behind a piling or on the outside of a river bend where the water's starting to slack, those are automatically the areas that I'm going to target for those, darker conditions. If I did switch to kind of a bottom, bouncing bait is what I prefer, I would go to a darker colored jig. And again, trying to find a small enough jig, but still with a heavy enough head that when I cast out and it hits bottom, it's not already 20 yards behind me down current.
Yeah, it's definitely and then boat position you kind of alluded to. It can be tough because you want to keep that in the strike zone.
It's a science.
You have to learn that current, the river, and it can be tough. It can be a challenge if you're not used to fishing the river.
So jig heads, like if you not getting into base, but just weights. If you had to give somebody like a 4 different weights for any flow rate, what would in your suggestion be if there's somebody that wants to come into the shop or anywhere to get stuff? What sizes if you had to pick 4?
Okay, so automatically anything that is above 1 ounce, I don't even worry about, because there's no conditions on any lake that I fish between Lake Holiday, Lake Frederick, and the Shenandoah River. I do not go over 1 ounce. If I were getting to the Potomac, I would consider it, but at least for the 3 rivers and bodies of water that we're focusing on today, nothing over 1 ounce. And the baits that I do have that are 1 ounce, I'm maybe going to have 1 or 2 of them is all, and it's going to be a green pumpkin and a black and blue. All of my money is invested in between 1/4 or 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce, and a 1/2 ounce.
That's good. Yeah.
I generally don't go below 1/4, especially in the river, because you do get in those situations where if you do have a little bit of flow, it's just hard to keep it in the strike zone. I think a 1/4 ounce on spinning gear, of course, whether it be a finesse jig or just a small Texas rig or a tube-headed jig that you can kind of work with the current and it gets down there when the river is really slow. That's what I'm going to. And then accordingly, I'll then go to a 3/8. Again, all this could change. I could have completely clear conditions, but if it's really windy out, then I could bump up my weight as well, because I want to be able to, either feel the bottom or I just need to get it down to a depth in general. But around here for these areas, there's no punching mats or, nothing that I need to drag around a huge, 1.25 ounce, 1.5 ounce jig on the bottom. I'm not, the largemouth that I do target are, not 10 plus pounders. Frederick is known to hold, some big fish like that, but generally speaking, I'm not throwing anything over an ounce. They're my cleanest looking jigs in my tackle box because I don't use them. Mm-hmm. It's 3/8. It would be probably the go-to all around that you can get by with. It's all right in wind. You can feel that river bottom pretty good, or you can drag it around at Lake Frederick, and same thing with a half. So those are going to be like, okay, I guess the long answer of my weights.
No, that's fantastic, because it's hard for somebody to know. And I think flow rate was a big thing you hit on, is understanding like you have to match the weight so it doesn't get swept with the current. That's crucial. And you can't throw a brick because you're going to get snagged every time. So there is a weird science there about making sure you have just enough weight to keep it there in contact without it getting flown down or getting snagged on everything. Now, before we switch to like Frederick, I do have a couple more questions. Like, so a river does fish, a legit river that's not tidal fishes different than a lake, and how you approach patterning, if you pattern at all. And when you're going out there, and tell the audience a little bit about how long do you spend in an area before you move. And so like if you go to a Lake Frederick, which we'll get to, that place is more pressure than some places in Japan. And so you know in your heart of hearts that maybe, you have to sit in an area all day until you get a bite. Do you approach the river that way, or do you have a mental clock of I'm going to be here for so long before I bug out to another place? Like how do you approach like knowing if this spot's going to be good for the river? How long do you spend there?
Okay. I think first step is going to be I'll check the parking lot. If I feel like there's a lot of pressure that day, or there's a lot of people out on the water, the first open chance that I get is where I don't see a boat around, I'll put the trolling motor down. So I'm talking as soon as the confluence ends and I feel like there's a lot of people up there in the parking lot, I'm going to start fishing. One thing I have learned about the Shenandoah River specifically is these fish will move overnight. Very rarely do I find them in a certain area and they're there the following week or even the next day. I've seen. And I think you get that a lot with these natural river systems.
So they are very pressured. They can't get pressured by anglers.
Yeah, the pressure's there, and they're just going to move. Whether that be and not even enough to notice, but if the river just dropped a couple inches, that's going to move the bait around and things like that. So that's why I try to not fish off any memories of what I did the following weekend or even the day before. I mean, obviously it's hard not to hit areas where I know I've caught them before. But the first thing I do is that's why I forget about where I caught them before, and I just try to put the trolling motor down early in a place where I maybe wasn't catching them the day before. Now I will use some of the same techniques and things like that, but as far as areas, they do change and they will move.
So let's say you caught him in place A last weekend. Okay. You go over to place A this weekend. Do you spend half your day there, an hour, 10 minutes, like in a vagary? Like how long do you think you're going to be like until, they're not here? Are river fish, are they generally more aggressive? Like you're going to know real quick if they're there before you pull the trolling motor, or do you feel like you can sit on a spot, generally speaking?
Yeah. So I've had maybe a handful of days in my entire life fishing the river where I could sit on a spot more than an hour, honestly.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I'm moving. If I'm not getting bites, it doesn't mean they're not there, but I don't know if it's a timing thing or something like that, but I'm getting out of there pretty quick.
Okay.
And the nice thing about the river, you do have the current. I use it to my advantage, so I always try to start above wherever that target area is trying to fish. And I get my boat positioned, so I'm using my trolling motor more or less to have a controlled drift is how I'm fishing. So that's another reason that kind of helps me, fish a spot, fairly thorough. If I feel like I'm like putting the trolling motor or, put it on like spot lock where I'm like trying to stay in one area too long, I know that if I'm not getting bites, I need to adjust what I'm doing. And it could be I was fishing an area that was 4 feet off the bank and now they're out in the middle of the channel. So after I kind of go through that phase of fishing an area like thoroughly and not just going down the bank.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the nice thing about the Shenandoah River is not so wide, that it definitely follows seasonal patterns. And then it does give you an opportunity to, and you were talking about high water. They always say high water, pound the banks. They're going to be nose of the bank type thing. But you can, even so, you see laydowns along the bank, fish that. Like you say, you can troll just slightly. You can even turn around and cast to the middle of the river then too, and work that middle of the river where you're going to have ledges and boulders and things in the middle.
Yep.
So those fish really, I always talk about bank to bank. Don't limit yourself, and then also think of the water column top to bottom. But it's not so wide that you can really position yourself. You can cover a lot of water, and then probably start to narrow down some sort of pattern.
You hit something that's very important for people that haven't fished the Shenandoah. This is not the Mississippi or the St. Lawrence where you have it is extremely broad. And so I think you said something about pressure and boat positioning. Do you have to make your mind up that, okay, if I want to fish the right bank, do I set my boat up right down the middle? Because if I do that, does the fish feel that pressure of that boat? Is that something where you're like, okay, if I'm going to fish the right bank, I got to make sure I'm really up against the left bank to make that bomb cast, to make sure those fish don't feel my pressure? I mean, how much do the fish feel that, and how would you set up your boat to attack a place?
Yeah, ultimately, I always start above the flow of where I want to fish, because I know when I get into that area, if I want to stay there, my trollometer is going to have to be on. And if we're looking at clear conditions and the water is low, I feel like that is going to affect the fish. Specifically, if I hook one and I notice that I've got multiples coming in with it and it's following me, I may think about just letting the boat just kind of drift, and then I will come back up river and kind of do the same thing again with a controlled drift. I never want to stay on the trolling motor. My foot is on the pedal and that prop is running. I'm always just a little adjustment to maybe keep the boat lined up.
So you're making your cast, so you're above your target, and then you're making your cast to the target that way, just so everyone can kind of visualize it when you say above the flow.
Yeah, essentially. Okay. So I will set the boat up before I get to that spot, and I'm going to be kind of going in reverse, drifting backwards into where I want to go. That way, I'm off the trolling motor and things like that. But to what Jared was saying, I think visually, and it's a little bit easier to think about a concept where if you can see a target to kind of cast at it, and beating the banks is probably the easiest way to fish, because I'm going to throw up in the shallow water and I'm going to drag it down. And whether or not you have electronics or not, I'll be completely honest, I don't mark fish on my Humminbird units and go back and fish them. I have, before, video game fish where I can mark something on my Humminbird, but I don't have live target or anything like that. All I'm looking for is depth and, what the bottom is, which again is something that can be done, with a heavy weighted jig or tube bait or something. Mm-hmm. You can feel a transition. Am I in kind of like, pea gravel bottom, or do I got heavy boulders and things like that? Are there big striations, that I'm seeing and stuff like that on the graph? So by no means am I using, fancy graph equipment, and it's stuff that, again, you can use, even if you just put a little weight out, a drop shot weight, and don't even tie a lure on, you can kind of feel your depth and things like that you're working with. But the middle of the river is kind of that unseen territory, because it's hard to fish, to be honest, especially if you don't have the electronics and equipment like that. You're not really throwing at a target, and it's easy to feel like, am I throwing at nothing? Like, what's out here? There's really no target to see. If I'm not able to mark the rocks and things and brush piles like everyone's talking about online and on YouTube videos, I'm not able to do those types of things. So again, it becomes a feel thing. So when I do get into a slow time, I find myself drifting out into the middle, and I'm just using the river to kind of ride it out. And I'm just kind of junk fishing, go back to dragging of worms or drop shots, downsize. That's when I really start going through the cycles.
And I think one thing about the river too, that the fact of the current and the fish are going to be more aggressive in the river system than they are in the lake because of the nature of the current. And food's moving, so they've got to react and respond, or they're not eating. And so, but if you get into that slack water, I've seen too where if you do get in there, and this time of year really can get crystal clear. And so, of course, if you can see down in there, they can see you. But if you do spook a fish or you see a fish and it's not eating, just make that mental note. And like you're saying, float to the middle, float down, go ahead and fish that. But I always try to make, mental note, come back in the next 20 minutes or so, stay off of that fish and throw to it. And I've caught fish that way by, kind of sight fishing. May not get it initially, but just make a mental note and come back around to it.
Yeah, absolutely. That again, that's something common with the river. It becomes easier because outside of kind of controlling your drifts and things like that, you are able to cover that water. And when the bite does get tough, smallmouth are notoriously aggressive. They'll let you know generally where they are. If the water is super clear, long casts and things like that, and just kind of change it up. But again, conditions are depending, and these fish are moving constantly, but they're so much fun. I mean, the smallmouth, I think we all agree, there's something special about fighting a smallmouth in the river current. That largemouth are fun too, but a nice smallmouth is really fun.
I did want to know too, when I remember when I was younger growing up, and I'd read articles about, fishing can be really great smallmouth fishing in February, and I like Neil, I fished, but my schedule was kind of bow hunted, a muzzleloader hunt, rifle hunted. I do a little bit of bird hunting and trout fishing in the month of January and February, and then I coached baseball. So I really didn't have the spring of the year. And then, I'd only fish the river in the summertime. And then when, Dad opened Jake's, we started hearing from the anglers, getting more of that information, and just that held true that, and I see where some of the largest smallmouth all year will be caught between November, December to February, March. That window, and you got to think most people, obviously diehard river rats, they know this, and they're gonna hate me for sharing this, but and a lot of people think, well, you don't fish in the wintertime, it's cold out. Well, it's some of your best fish can come during the winter months.
And so before we change to the other bodies of water in the area, could you give your 3 generic baits that you would have tied on for the people at home to understand, like the 3 baits that you would tie on from now in November to February? Like, what were 3 baits somebody should go out and get if they're trying to take their kid fishing?
Okay, my first bait is going to be just a simple 1/4 ounce jig head.
Write this down.
With any sort of minnow style bait. There's no brand specific. I use everything from like a Demiki Armor Shad to a Strike King little small plastic swim bait, little Kitex and things like that work. But anything that's light with little action. And when I'm working that, again, I'm kind of just letting the river do its thing. It's not really a controlled retrieve.
It's like a spy bait, so to speak, where it's just a slow roll. Yeah,
essentially like that. And it's something that I want to, in my mind, I want to just think that, all right, I'll throw it out, let it hit bottom, and then I don't want it to hit bottom again. I don't want to bump anything. I just am visualizing that, all right, so I got it about 6 inches to 1.5 feet off the bottom, and that's my retrieve, how I'm working it that way. The Ned rig would be my next go-to by far. Both the Z-Man large TRD and the small one. And I like to say that I catfish with those, because you're throwing it out and I'm just watching my line. You really gotta sometimes less is more in those situations. And the best feeling that you could get is when you think that you're hung up, but then you feel a nice head shake and it's like, man, I wasn't doing anything with it. It's really dumb fishing, but it's cold. Most of the time I'm going to have gloves on this time of year. So I just, I'm very slow how I'm working my Ned rig.
Are you throwing that Ned rig at a 45 up current and letting the current kind of take it down, or are you How are you working
Yeah,
that?
so I'm working everything. If it's not at a 45, it's up current and coming back
dragging
down.
the speed of your boat.
Yeah.
And so
That's a good
people, like,
technique.
if you don't know this, don't cast downstream and bring it back, generally speaking. Like, so when he's talking about everything is thinking if the current's hitting you in the face, most of your casts are going up, so it comes with the current, or like you said, at a 45-degree angle. But generally speaking, I've had some kids in my boat too when I've gone out, and they bomb cast it backwards and drag it up, and it no bueno. That's not something you want to be doing. But just to add that little 2 cents
not
there.
to keep it too simple, but for those that haven't done it, you just kind of let the current. I mean, you're drifting, plus the current is working that at a speed of the current, which is kind of, I think fish too. They kind of are used to that. You might just occasionally have to, pick it up and tap, just kind of work it. But like you're saying, keep it along the bottom, the do nothing technique.
Yeah. And you can do it again. A Ned rig. I also, in the same category as that, I will go to a jig, a small finesse jig is also in that. Both of these are going to be on light line setups. I'm throwing anywhere from 6 to 8 pound test fluorocarbon is all I'm throwing on that. And hang-ups are going to happen and things like that, but when it's super cold, that's what I'm looking to work. I want it on the bottom, moving slow and pulling it down with the current. I just feel like if you do like what you talked about, bringing it kind of up the current, I don't think the fish get as much of a chance to look at that. They're used to, either sitting behind boulders or rocks or little eddies, and the food is coming down towards them to ambush it. And when you bring it out, I think of it, I don't want to bring it back. It's past its tail. I want them to see it, identify it, and then him be able to make the move on it for my best chance to get it. Not saying that you could throw downriver and pull it up and catch a fish. That's completely possible. But what I feel like is giving me my best chance is to work it with the current. And then my third option is going to be a jerkbait. A deep diving jerkbait.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I use the Mega Bass Vision 110 +1. That's my only jerkbait that I throw this time of year. I have confidence in that. I use suspend dots as well because I'm fishing in a river. So what they are, they're just, I don't know if anybody's familiar with those or the viewers, but they're basically little pieces of lead. They look like a hole punch. And they have, it's just a lead sticky piece of paper, and I'll just put them, put 3 or 4 of them on the bottom just to add a little bit of weight to a jerkbait, because in the current, I really want it to get down and suspend, and I don't need it to stay there because I know it's going to be drifting. So it's hard to work a jerkbait in a river. So that's why putting the suspend dots on it for me. Make it a little bit easier to cast, and will slow it down enough in the river so that I can work it.
What kind of cadence are you working with the
so when it's obviously the colder the water, I'm just letting, again, everything is current and boat dictated. So going back to like boat position and the current flow, I'm really only reeling up my slack, and it's more not the cadence I have found doesn't matter. More or less it's how hard are you snapping it. Sometimes I'll do a couple quick snaps with it, get it down, and it's literally just floating, and I'll just start reeling up and maybe give it a pop every 1 to 2 seconds, and have found success doing that. Or sometimes I've worked it super quick. As soon as it hits the water, I'm snapping it and reeling in constantly as soon as I can get back to the boat. Those work it well. I think it really just depends on what either mood the fish are doing, or if you're in an area. Right. But it's completely different in a lake. I'm not afraid to work it super fast, even when the water's cold. And to get back to what you said, this is a magic time of year for the rivers specifically. Mentally, when I know it's starting to get cold and water temperatures in the lakes are below the 50s, I am on the river. Like, I will not go back to the lakes until late March.
I was going to ask you that question, like, because you fish both, kind of what dictates in your mind, like, I'm going to the lake today versus I'm going to the river, if there was any rhyme or reason to your choice of river over lake. So water temperature.
The Shenandoah is a strange animal. the part of the river, and again, I'm only speaking for this Riverton stretch because I'm really unfamiliar with any other parts of the river. But the Riverton section of Shenandoah, throughout the summer months and things like that, you can go catch a lot of fish. I always joke I might go catch 100 fish for like 3 pounds because you'll get a lot of bites, but the quality of fish aren't there. Like if I catch a 2-pounder in July, I mean, that's like going to be the fish of the day for sure. I'm not exactly sure why that is. I haven't found where they go, but I just know when the water temperature warms up and it's around that spawning time, they disappear, and it's like, all right, I'll see you in October. It's kind of what happens there. So my time that I fish the river is I'm focusing on the October until the spawn. That's when I feel like the fishing the river is the best for that stretch. It's deeper water. It's a great wintering hole. And I just believe that I think that's, why they're in those areas, because maybe they do go upriver and get to the areas where the jet boats have access to it that I don't. But when the water temperature starts to cool down, it's a magical time. And likewise, less people are out fishing. Pleasure boaters, the jet skis get put away.
Kind of have it to yourself.
Yeah, a lot of hunters are in the tree stand, and there's plenty of days where it's like, wow, I'm the only one out here.
That's right.
And
something to be said about that.
I got one more question before we switch to the lake. So everyone says wintertime's great. So if I'm taking my kid or my brother or whatever, do I just pick any winter day, or is there specific conditions? Because I know, like in the springtime through the summer, generically speaking, as long as there's no tornado, you can go out and probably catch something. The weather can't be terrible. But I feel like the wintertime's a little bit different. Is it like every single day you can go out there and have success? Or are there some days that you're like, I'm just not going out. It's not worth it. Like, if you had to pick conditions where maybe safety-wise it's a problem, but then like you actually have a chance to catch. Is that the case in the wintertime when you're fishing?
Yeah, so I would argue every fisherman's worst nightmare is cold, dirty water.
Okay.
It becomes because as I said previously, I'm working quick moving baits with possible lethargic fish, and my confidence starts to go down there because I already know that I'm not going to get a lot of bites today, and I've eliminated my top 3 go-to lures for that time because the flow is going to be up and the water is going to be stained. So I would say any condition that has good clarity, yes, absolutely. If you find a deep hole, or if you go to Riverton, you will catch fish. And quite possibly it could be your biggest fish of the year.
And let me say too, real quick, the numbers, you're talking about numbers in the summer, quantity of fish are going to go down. Like some guys go out too, they'll fish 5-6 hours and they may only get one bite, but like
in the wintertime,
it is the biggest fish. You might get 4 or 5 bites, or get 4 or 5 in the boat. You're not going to have the quantity, and it makes it tough when you're out there and it's cold, but the quality of fish tend to be better.
Yeah. From a tournament fishing perspective, I'll get into that at Riverton because tournaments do go out of there. Any month that is outside of our late fall to early springtime, I would expect a quality to winning bag coming out of there would be to 12 to 13 pounds range realistically. And that's going to come from a mixed bag of both largemouth and smallmouth. In the warmer conditions, if the water temperature is above 70, I would say that's realistic. I've had multiple 20-pound bags in the colder months.
That's nuts.
Just for a perspective.
So
and that's something that's hard to do.
April to October, 12 to 13, and then October to April, you're talking 20 plus around that. That's
20,
insane. Wow.
And it's not just me. I've seen other 20-pound bags out there, and it can realistically be done. I've seen 20, 21, and 22 pounds win tournaments, whether that be with Shenandoah Valley or North Mountain.
That's crazy. Holy moly.
Yeah, and it's incredible. And for whatever reason, this time of year, during the summer, you kind of can get bit everywhere. But it's more or less like when you do find that area or that school of fish, they're together and they're big. And if I have a spot where I just caught a 3, I'm gonna stay there because a 4 is coming. You know, that's why I'm out there. That's why I'm freezing and it's cold and it's windy and it sucks. I'm gonna get hopefully at least 5 bites, but they're gonna be you know, the 5 quality,
The right
bites
ones, yeah,
that I'm looking for. And again, it makes it worth it. You forget about your fingers are freezing and you know you can't hardly breathe because it's so cold. I've had it where like my eyelets are starting to freeze up as I'm reeling in. You can't hardly cast because your line's frozen. Yep, those are the days where the big smallmouth are still gonna bite, and it's just such a you can be so close to them but so far away. I've had days where I mean, you're out there for like 6 hours and you don't get a bite and you're like scratching your head. And then you just happen to finally hit a spot where one bites and it's like they were all there. So it's more mentally challenging because the bites are not there. So it's easy to get discouraged. For sure. If you're unfamiliar with anything, you just gotta, you gotta put your time in. But anything I've learned, there's no secret lure. There's no secret technique. There's nothing magical about like what I'm able to do that someone else isn't doing. It's just that, you know, I've put the time in and I understand. There's been plenty of times where I'll fish with someone else in the boat with me and I will tie the exact same lure on, exact same weight, same trailer, color, everything. And for whatever reason, they're not getting the bites. So it's just something, I guess, subconsciously, how I'm able to work it on the bottom. And those are just things that you'll have to learn. You can still watch all the videos, set yourself up, buy all the gear. I can set you up, give you all my setups, tell you where I was catching them. But, you know, they might not be there. So you just kind of got to keep that in mind.
That's a very good point. I mean, time on the water, and I know I struggle with that. I don't go enough consecutive days, or not even consecutive, just enough in a season to you know, figure things out. I mean, you got to spend time on the water. I mean, that's your best way to learn and to you know, have the opportunity to even catch fish.
And the nice thing about the Shenandoah, and I'm just going to compare something complete opposite, like Lake St. Clair that I've gone and fished up in Michigan. I go back to revert to the same thing. I'm like, how do I fish Lake St. Clair? I'm like Googling stuff again. It's like, you know, I'm reverting back to what I was doing 10 years ago. And one of the big things was like, hey, find out where the bass boats are and just get close to them.
Yeah.
I found that didn't work for me. You know, I drive out there, I drive, you know, 8 hours, get up there, put my boat in. Conditions are perfect. I'm out there and it's a new body of water for me. And I'm like not getting bites. So I just go back to my instinct and I go into the Detroit River because I'm like, well, I know how to fish rivers. I know how to fish Shenandoah. And I'll go in there and I've had big time success fishing the Detroit River because, again, it's something I was used to. So I feel like the whole confidence bait, I mean, hey, if you're catching them at your farm pond, you can take that to the river. I don't have the secret to the bait, but also know that you don't have to fish behind somebody, or if you get out there and there is a lot of boats and everybody says, oh, they're all up at the bridge or something, like, no, there are more places than one. Right. There's no secret. I have multiple places and I go through a rotation. And it's where I've caught them in the past. And if they're not one, I'll go to that. And when I run throughout all those, it's back to the drawing board. So I don't, maybe on a bigger lake or something, you know, if you could be on an area where there are winning fish or quality fish, but they're always moving.
Yeah. I think, you know, and I see all the time in here, customers, you got to be careful too with too much information. And I think in a day and time where we're looking for the exact right hook with the right weight, with the right color, with the right everything, and I agree with that. I always felt like there's no wrong way to fish. And I mean, I've seen guys catch 4 or 5 pounders, you know, with a tube hook, and he put a swim bait on it because he didn't have a swim bait hook, right? And it was new to him, and he's a heck of a fisherman. And stick a 5 pounder. So it's like, nobody would ever do that. Like, that's just silly. But it worked. And so, I mean, not that you want to do that all the time, but I'm just saying, though, don't get so caught up, especially if you're new to this, don't get so caught up with having everything exactly right. I think getting out on the water and just going at it, and then through that process of being on the water, you'll begin to figure out what's working, what's not working.
Yeah, and I call that like the culture of the 1%. Because so its example is when Nike says if you buy this shoe, it'll make you like 1/3 of a second faster. And it's like that works for your elite college athletes that are looking for that. If you are Joey Bag of Donuts, that doesn't matter to you. It doesn't apply. And I think in fishing, we get this issue where it's like, well, it's all about the bait and this. It's like, yeah, if you're an elite angler and you maybe need 2 more bites a year to cash a check, absolutely, I think the bait thing can matter. But if you are literally trying to go out there and just catch something, that same type of mindset doesn't apply to you. It's not about the bait. It's learning how to fish a river, the body of water. If you get around them, you don't have to have the specific secret bait to at least have a little bit of success.
Exactly.
So, yeah, thank you guys.
Neil, thank you for coming on. We're definitely going to have you back on again. Thanks again, guys. Everything from the episode will be in the episode description. This has been Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Aarons. Who's this here?
Jared Mounts.
We'll see you next time. See ya. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your hosts, Thomas Aarons and Jared Mounts. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.